Hey everyone, welcome to 5 at 6:45. So tonight I thought I'd bring you something I shared with Gen Kids recently. So if you're playing along, we're going to go to Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2. And we're actually only going to do half the verse, so it's super easy. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Now, what does it mean to fix our eyes? So it means to hold a gaze, so not to be distracted, to look at something for a period of time and not be distracted by anything else. So how do we do that when we can't see Jesus? Well, this is the question I asked the kids, and they gave me some great answers, like going to church, praying, reading our Bible, worshipping, praising Him, thanking Him, all those things. And the best one I think was listening, because sometimes we forget to listen to Him. So all of these things are things that help us fix our eyes on Jesus. So the next question I asked them, and I'll ask you tonight, is why is it so important as Christians to fix our eyes on Jesus? So I'm going to read a passage now, and I would ask you to think about how this passage relates to the verse that we just read. So if you're still playing along, we're going to go to Matthew chapter 14, starting at verse 22, and it's just after Jesus fed the 5,000. Right away, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat. He had them go ahead of him to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Then he sent the crowd away. After he had sent them away, he went up on a mountainside to pray to him, by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. The boat was already a long way from land. It was being pounded by the waves because the wind was blowing against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to the disciples. He walked on the lake. They saw him walking on the lake and were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. Right away, Jesus called out to them, "Be brave, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, is it you?" Peter asked. "If it is, tell me to come out onto the water." "Come," Jesus said. So Peter got out of the boat and he walked on the water towards Jesus. But when Peter saw the wind, he was afraid and he began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me!" Right away, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "Your faith is so small," he said. "Why did you doubt me?" And when they climbed in the boat, the wind died. And then those in the boat worshipped Jesus. They said, "You really are the Son of God." So I just want to talk quickly about Peter. So Peter was one of the disciples in the boat that didn't recognize Jesus when he first appeared. But when Jesus spoke, that's when Peter recognized him. And not only did he recognize him, he knew him, and that's why he asked, "If you call me, I will come." He knew Jesus, he recognized him and knew him, and he knew that if Jesus called him out on that water, he would be able to do it. So when Jesus said, "Come," Peter was ready. He got up and he got out of the boat and he walked. He did the impossible. He walked on that water. He had his eyes fully fixed on Jesus and he walked on the water. Now, Peter is human. He was human like the rest of us. And at some point during that walk, his eyes just lowered a little bit and he started to realize what he was doing, what was going on around him, the waves, the sea, and he started to sink. But was that the end of Peter? No. He quickly fixed his eyes on Jesus. He didn't call out to his friends in the boat and say, "Hey, come and get me. Can't you see I'm sinking?" No, he didn't. He immediately called out to God, called out to Jesus and said, "Lord, save me." And what did Jesus do? He was there straight away. Peter knew that when he called, Jesus would be there, and he was gentle and kind and brought him back to the boat, brought him back to where he should be. So fixing our eyes on Jesus is so important because we need to be able to recognize him in our everyday life, recognize when he calls us but not just to recognize when he calls us to something, but to know him enough to trust and step out into that something. And why? Because he is the author and perfecter of our faith. He is the beginning and the end. Jesus is our faith. We must know him. We need to know him one-on-one. People can try to add and take away to our faith, but the fact is that it is perfect in itself. So we need to have that relationship one-on-one with him, so that when he calls us, or when we are starting to sink, if we've managed to get out of that boat, if we do start to think that we know him so well that the first thing that we do is call out to him. There's a song that I learnt as a child that's still sung in church today. I'm not going to sing it to you, but it goes like this. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. So I'm going to go now, but maybe if you've got 5 minutes and perhaps, you're out on that water and you're starting to maybe sink and see things that would seem to be impossible to get through, that maybe you can put that song on and just refocus and refix your eyes on Jesus. Or maybe you're like the other disciples and you're still sitting in that boat. You've recognized Jesus, but you just can't take that first step. I just encourage you just to sit with him for a while and just get to know who he is, so that you can trust him, because he is the author and perfecter of our faith. Have a great week. See ya.